Welcome, everybody. Of course, it's very exciting to be here. I am a Las Vegas resident for the last few years, so I'm not quite a native. I don't know what the status is. When do I stop being a tourist?
Now.
Okay, good. And so to see how public art has grown since I've gotten here, 2011, 2012 has been amazing. I'm coming out from Los Angeles where I was covering public art downtown LA, and sometimes we make comparisons, which I understand as an Angelino is a bad thing to do, correct?
Or the other one.
Oh. I have to do it. Can I just put it as an earring? Oh, when I turn my, oh, I see, oh, look at that, it's like physics. And so, how do we get a bigger budget for public art? Now we have slide presentations, but let's start off. And Newberry. I would love to, if any architects get a chance to meet Susie Newberry at UNLV. She's a whetstone of information. I'm in my final year of an MFA program using these public art writings for practice in writing, and she's a tough grader. But I hope you all look her up as a resource for information. Last year in one class for Art in the City, Learning from Las Vegas was like the main publication that we all had to read. So this conference is perfect, especially when it comes to public art. Paco, what does public art do for Las Vegas?
Well, it changes the conversation. That's the biggest thing that it can do for a community. You know, when you think of Las Vegas, especially around the world, especially how we've marketed the destination for so many years, you don't think of art and culture. And as a native of this community and someone who's done a lot of research at the university, both as an undergrad back in the late 1990s, studying anthropology, and today as in the urban leadership program in the College of Public Policy and Leadership, you know, we can dispel that by the data that exists in the research materials that I've been able to discover at UNLV Special Collections. And I think we can prove without a doubt that, you know, we have art and culture, and, you know, the nice thing is that we have matured enough as a city that we've begun investing millions of dollars into public art, both from the Arts Commission side, the Regional Transportation Commission. The county now has a public art program, which is interesting because the county's public art program is double the budgets that we have both in the RTC and in the Arts Commission. I mean, you're looking at what, close to $2 million for the county. And the Arts Commission, at our last Arts Commission meeting, I think we had $110,000 to play with. So we have a lot of growing up to do. And so it's nice to see where our city has evolved in that front.
And I think that so many people were ready for public art, so when the money was here, people actually kind of knew what to do, which was a great situation. And that's how you kind of see more items out here. Tony, how does public art help identify the state?
Well, I like the idea of drive-through art, or essentially the intersection of public art and freeways, where art on the move can foster a sense of identity and community and inclusion, while also altering the aesthetics and maybe purpose of a place. I guess the end result will be to create something that's an individual and societal dialogue about culture, context, and function. And I think the coupling seems ideal for a city like Las Vegas that's really defined by energy and movement, spectacle, and excitement.
And when I moved out here, I always saw public art as, whether it be murals or sculpture, as a way for me to understand the city or a neighborhood when you come to Los Angeles. And when I got out here, I was thinking about writing about it. Eventually, I got a Warhol grant to do the same thing out here at paintthisdesert.com. That's paintthisdesert.com. And I'm also on Instagram at paintthisdesert.com. But the first thing that I noticed about a month in was the Zap boxes, the early round. And I mean, you see the sculpture, you can interpret the strip as public art, you can interpret so many things that aren't really about public art, but it's one of the Zap boxes by Starbucks that had the picture of a television show from the 50s, and I can't remember which one, but that told me, oh, there's a little pulse of life here where there is an intimate relationship with public art, and it is trying, there are programs here that try to get me to identify with the neighborhood, to the community, and understand it more. So that kind of, like, and that was really early on, and that was really interesting for me to kind of, oh, I get to know this neighborhood. I get to know the neighborhood beyond the strip. Of course, I was still there at the Starbucks looking outside of the box, but you get the gist. What is one of the most important pieces, do you think, Paco, that's come out since you've been really surveying public art?
As far as projects for the city?
Yeah, all projects for the city.
You know, we've had, the development of Hoover Dam brought a significant portion of art to the city, but that, of course, it was in the 30s and several miles away. But I would say the single most important piece of public art in the city is the flashlight at UNLV by Kruja von Brugen and Klaus Oldenburg. And I name her first because she never gets enough credit. And that was very stereotypical. Many architects and designers and artists in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. I say that because it is the first, I've been able to find out, it's the first site-specific work of art that was created for our city. And it's a beautiful sculpture made out of steel right between the Judy Bailey Theater and the Ham Concert Hall. That was, it was highly documented. It was created in the East Coast. It was brought over on the side of a truck. It was all videotaped, and it just celebrated its anniversary not too long ago. Right,
and it's probably the most heavily documented piece of public art because it seems everybody gets assigned to cover it for a paper somehow. The state, give me a couple, like what's the most important one in Reno, but also a little bit about the visibility, the high visibility of those flat ramps on the freeway.
Boy, that's a tough one. I guess I'm going to pivot and point to a recent example with Hugo Rodinigme's Seven Magic Mountains. I'll keep the topic on art and transportation. I think that's kind of a neat coupling since it's visible from the roadside, visible from the freeway, and really has been able to attract a lot of people to pull over, take a look, investigate further. And I think it sort of stands as a neat juxtaposition of these candy-colored sort of rock monuments in the desert.
Rock monuments.
well, I like the juxtaposition of that with the Las Vegas Strip, which we could argue is the same thing. Neon flavored, soaring monuments erected in the middle of the desert.
And it's great because it was also funded by a New York Firm Public Art Fund,
yep.
Right? And the idea that it is an homage by the artist to land art, which is indigenous to Las Vegas, but also it's pop art. I think it makes it a specific Las Vegas piece. You have people really are just attracted to coming out to see it. It almost becomes the first stop. It used to be the state line, now it's Seven Magic Mountains. For me, it's Vaquero. It's the statue, I got my notes here, over by Jimenez at McCarran Airport, one of the first major pieces, but it also has indigenous Las Vegas ideas behind it because of the use of acrylics and paints that will last in the sun. Right now, and it's under McCarran Airport. It was a major piece under the Public Art Project McCarran Airport. It's getting beaten up a little bit by the sun now. I think there's probably valuable enough it comes from a cast, and there's a cast at the Smithsonian. And I went to Houston to see the other the cast made, and it's beautiful because it was just refurbished. But I think that's probably the most important piece, and I, being culturally biased, like the idea that a Latino is bringing in public art coming across the hill, but that's just me. Presentations, I think we have slides. We could probably just sit here and have coffee talk in Danish and probably talk for a couple hours. Did you want to go ahead with your presentation? Do you have it set up?
I do.
First of all, how many people here are public artists? Any public artists here? Cool, cool. How many are architects who have worked with public artists directly? Better. Now here's a tough question. How many here are architects who work with public artists directly before the project gets funded during the planning stage? Okay. That is a big step, and I'm glad you did that. Give yourself a round of applause for that one. Because the worst public art, or at least the least effective public art, is the kind that happens after the project is done. Then it has the risk to become just decoration. And I think that we all recognize that, but I just wanted to get on the record somewhere. All right, sir.
Okay.
Here we go? Okay. I hope that maybe somehow we can get a list of the public art projects from this room and put them up somewhere. I think that'd be good for me. Because, you know, all artists, the good ones borrow, the better ones steal. I need some ideas. Temporary.
So I think we got this worked out now. There we go. So just really briefly about the Nevada Department of Transportation. We turned 100 years old this year. We have over 1,800 employees statewide, $1 billion biannual budget, 44 maintenance stations statewide. We oversee a little under 1,200 bridges and nearly 1,400 or 14,000 lane miles. Most people may not know this, we have roughly 340,000 square feet of maintained office space. So funding. Funding is included in the overall project cost for landscape and aesthetics. As a rule, up to 3% of the new construction and capacity improvement funds may be used for that purpose. In 2002, we adopted our landscape and aesthetics master plan that can be found on our website at nevadadot.com. Obviously, it's been updated and amended several times since then. But just sort of a rough idea of the vision is that state highways should reflect the land and people of Nevada. Nevadans should have aesthetically pleasing highways that are also safe and cost-effective. As such, it is our mandate that no state highway is complete until landscape and aesthetics are addressed. Design guidelines. Public art, such as the extruded corten steel structures of native animals, such as horses, burros, as well as indigenous plant life, help form and reinforce a sense of place and identity that strengthens our community ties. I'm going to use a couple of recent examples that are still under construction right now, most notably I-11. We expect to finish the first phase of this by year's end. And the visual centerpiece of this is a 1,200-foot long, nearly 30-foot tall concrete retaining wall. It's multicolored, textured, and it has these extruded corten steel figures and objects that illustrate scenes from the construction of Hoover Dam. We wanted something that would reflect Boulder City's and that area's social, cultural, and economic history, and at the same time act as iconic graphic gateway into Boulder City. As we do with most of our public artwork, we coat it with a special anti-graffiti film that serves as a deterrent for taggers. So if it does get tagged with graffiti, we add this little solution and it lifts right up. Next, I want to talk about Project Neon. For those of you that don't know, this is the largest public works project ever undertaken in state history. For us, it's 20 years in the making. Broke ground a little over a year ago and will be under construction through the summer of 2019. One of the interesting things for the purpose of our conversation today is we're going to create something we call neon dunes. This is going to be a 5.5 acre oasis of sandhills landscaped with cacti, yucca, other drought-resistant native plants inspired by Nevada's natural topography. And we also have two sculptures, including one called Hot Dip, that's the one on top, and Found Font, the one on bottom, at the opposite corners of Grand Charleston and Grand Central Parkway, to create an iconic gateway entrance into not only downtown Las Vegas, but the Arts District, into Symphony Park as well. Atkins is the lead designer for this, with Punch Architecture responsible for the sculptures. The state, along with the city of Las Vegas, held an architecture competition here about 4 years ago. And here's a map, to kind of get a better idea of where they are located. The sculptures will run about $2 million. But the idea is to create a grand sense of arrival and identity.
Can I ask, could you go back a couple slides?
Sure. Okay. Right, so this is the retaining wall. It's going to be the main visual element for the first segment of I-11. And it illustrates scenes from the construction of Boulder Dam, later Hoover Dam. Neon Dunes is a new space being created as part of construction of Project Neon. And then you can kind of get an idea as far as placement goes. So it's our hope that these sculptures can help forge a sense of inclusion, making an emotional connection for visitors and locals alike, transforming Neon Dunes into a destination. It has the potential to be to downtown Las Vegas what maybe the Space Needle is to Seattle or the Golden Gate Bridge is to San Francisco. Now, admittedly, those are pretty ambitious goals, but Project Neon is a pretty ambitious project. It's $1 billion. And like I said, it's 2 decades in the making. But, you know, I think we're hoping to do, you know, if you take a look at the Golden Gate Bridge, it's a piece of infrastructure that has become so ingrained with the San Francisco community that most people can't imagine the city without it. It's how they identify that sense of place. And really, it's the only piece of infrastructure I know that's used as a logo for a professional sports franchise like NBA's Golden State Warriors, which I think says a lot. These are some inspirational images for found font. It will be perforated middle mass of purple swirls, about 60 foot long and 25 foot tall. It's an homage to the great neon sign history of the city. That's what it's trying to evoke. And in case you're wondering, the sign doesn't actually spell or say anything. It's an abstraction. And here's Hot Dip. This will be roughly 250 foot long. It'll be a series of undulating steel posts in varying heights that reach a peak of roughly 35 feet. And then retaining walls will be adorned with graphics of native desert animals and landscapes that provide a visual treat for motorists. That's all I have.
Obviously, I'm here to Paco doesn't have slides, but he's his own walking visual. But we were talking earlier. My dad retired from Caltrans. My brother's a civil engineer. All I have to do is do a mural somewhere, and I could be part of the family business. But NDOT has taken a lot of research, a lot of resources. The West Side corridor of that's another piece. That took a lot of research. And knowing on that backstory where you talked to community and got the backstory is the same process of social practice that we've done at UCLA Digital Mural Lab, where I work with Professor Judith Paco, a muralist who started the City of Los Angeles program, which Philadelphia is based off. So you you actually started something there that was great research, and I hope that continues. It ends up with a few murals that were maybe not executed as well as could have, but that process of communicating outreach with the community, even though it was sort of like maneuvered to have to happen, it was a great start, and I hope that NDOT continues to do that.
So with every project we undertake, we have a series of public meetings, we do outreach to all the stakeholders, businesses, residents in that area, and really, we want their feedback. The problem is we don't always get it.
Right.
People are busy. It's understandable. People have busy lives, but the opportunities are there, and certainly we do welcome it. And to your point, we do try to do aesthetics and artistic treatments that reflect the area and the community. For example, a bridge passing, near Nellis Air Force Base, has little homage to the base and its history. Even when you're traveling out through the Moapa, you can see the bridge there has iconography reflective of the Paiute tribe. And so we're sensitive to that, and we do look to, create that uniqueness and site-specific type of work where we can.
Well, there's something unique there with Nellis because it's the large airplanes along the highway, right? And that is actually something that can be done throughout the state because that actually gives you public art that you can see on Google when people look how to get to a certain place in Las Vegas. And so you have public art appearing on Google. That's what was really interesting to me on that. Paco, do you have a video?
I do.
Cool.
Stand on this side.
And then I'll stand over here again.
This is the artist Luis Varela Rico. He's an artist that we've commissioned at the City of Las Vegas Arts Commission to do a major piece of public art on the Main Street couplet, which is right here to our west. As you know, Main Street is being redirected and then coupleted with, if that's even a word, couplet with Commerce. And right there at the Main Street couplet with Commerce is where we're doing a piece that he was inspired by the Paiutes. As a matter of fact, they're two large steel baskets that will sit about 30 feet high, and they'll be put up against each other, and it represents both movement, especially with the train tracks just to the west of where the sculpture will be, and then, of course, the industrial nature of this neighborhood when the city was first founded in 1905 and throughout its railroad past. Now, this piece that this video shows is actually a piece that he had at the county, and this was on exhibition in the Rotunda at Clark County Government Center, and now is currently on exhibition down on Fremont Street, one of the private properties window right next to the Public Us cafe. So if we could start the video. Thank you.
Okay.
So he's a local. He was born in Mexico and came here as a young boy with his mom, who is Irma Winans, and she's the cultural director at the Winchester Cultural Center. We listen to a little bit of music. Thank you. And he's actually, interestingly enough, he became an artist by accident. Has no formal training. He's actually works for Otis Elevators and travels around the world building elevators. And he started doing guerrilla art with these origami sculptures that he would actually go out and put them on buildings without the building owner knowing. And some of his sculptures, I actually, when I was sitting at the cafe over by the Arts Factory down in the Arts District, I looked over and I saw one of these origami birds hanging off the side of this old law building, and I was fascinated. I said, this is amazing. We have someone who's actually doing graffiti sculpture. And got a chance to meet him, and we became friends, and he has actually scaled, there's a tower down on Stewart that's about 200 feet tall. It's an old communications tower. He scaled that and hung 3 of his sculptures off of that. One of them is still there. It's kind of flopping in the wind. It's been taken apart, but he started doing that, and then he started being inspired to create sculptures, and he became very active in actually applying for public art projects, both at the county, the city. He does some national projects. And then, of course, his biggest project is radial symmetry that we've commissioned him to do for the city. And that's about a $220,000 project, which will be completed in, hopefully if all goes well, in August of 2018. So as you can tell, there's a lot of public art projects that we're doing. One last thing that I'd like to mention, a major project that the city did about 8 years ago was the paintbrushes by Dennis Oppenheim. It was the last work of art that Dennis did before he sadly passed away of cancer. Actually, his wife had to finish that project. And those 2 sculptures are on Charleston. During the day, they disappear into the environment, but they really come alive at night. So if you've had a few too many drinks or have gone to one of the dispensaries and go look at this thing lit up at night, you'll be very happy. Thank you.
Okay. All right. A little bit of controversy with the brushes.
A lot of controversy with the
If
brushes.
we want to briefly talk about that too.
Yeah, so one of the, I think, and I can say this both as a local and I know some people in the audience may cringe, but I think they fail as sculpture. We ended up, the reason why the city went down this road to hire Dennis Oppenheim to bring these sculptures to the city is that we didn't hire Dennis for his talents as an artist. He's an incredibly talented artist, of course. We hired a name. We spent $700,000, $620,000 to buy a name to try to put Las Vegas on the cultural map. And what he originally proposed, which was an archway over Charleston with these paint brushes or paint buckets that would spill over the street with these flamingos, was the original plan, but then he realized it was going to cost too much money. And then there was the idea of 6 paintbrushes, which would create an archway, and then a beam of light would go a couple hundred feet into the air and cross over Charleston. But in a low, humid environment like Las Vegas, that didn't work very well. And then when he placed the sculpture, when the engineers placed the sculpture on Casino Center in Charleston, the artist and his engineers did not calculate that there were power lines. So eventually the 2 paintbrushes, due to cost, the 6 were going to be too expensive, don't exactly point at each other. They were supposed to create an archway over Charleston. Many years later, I found out from an engineer or an artist at Yesco, at the Young Electric Sign Company, that they could have done probably 8 of those paintbrushes through Yesco for about $500,000. So it was interesting to see that. And it became controversial because of the money that was spent, and it was never really truly embraced by the community.
Well, for whatever it's worth, we're in a room full of architects, and I'm sure everyone here has been through a scenario where cost cutting has somehow altered and or compromised their final vision.
Never. Show a hand, never.
Yeah.
I'm going to say never. Raise your hand. Agree with that? Yeah, okay, I think so. When I came here and I knew about the brushes, but I didn't know the backstory, and to me they worked because he did tell me what the area was. And so when you hear the backstory, and it becomes a whole different piece. I compare it to David Siqueiros' American Tropical 1932 in Los Angeles, which was whitewashed because it was supposed to be an innocent version of a Mexican village by Christina Spearling for Rivera Street, but then they had an indigenous figure in the middle being crucified. I don't know why that's so touchy, but as it was whitewashed, and then it came about later on, but interestingly enough, in the 70s, when the whitewash started coming out, it was the inspiration and muse for new urban mural art coming out of the 70s and 80s. But sometimes with public art, the backstory is much more interesting than the piece itself. It doesn't mean that you can't bring in high-profile artists to do work. City Center is an example, and is Quinn here?
Yeah, we should.
Can you please stand up, because I would like you to take a bow for the work you've done to bring that public art to the strip. And because we're talking about don't bring in the big people, but here's an example. It's a wonderful program. It is inspiring, and it is on the international map of what public art is on the strip. So I think that is, I saw you were here, I'm glad you are. Just thanks for taking a bow, and whenever you get a chance to, take a bow whenever you can. Let me switch my hat to panelist. There's not enough murals. Is my thingy up? I don't have a clicker. Oh, you have it. I'm being sabotaged. Wrong way? This one. It's about the approach. In learning from Las Vegas and how a city was defined by car, you realize, even though I'm a Southern Californian who lived in downtown trying to get people out of cars, it is still about the approach. It is about roadside vernacular. And I found that the public art really has a connection to Las Vegas when it's part of a roadside vernacular. I did a little tour of maybe making a loop around Las Vegas, and with it, you kind of get a really good idea of what kind of public art we have in town. Of course, this is where it all starts. And the sign, which I can probably say is about my age, out in the middle of nowhere, forever and ever. But now, what is really special is that it's become a different kind of monument. And now it has almost become, or it has become, a memorial for what's happened in the last couple of weeks. And people coming from the world to leave messages. I compare it to an altar where people are leaving items that remind us of some of the victims. And I don't know what's going to happen to any kind of memorial, but right now, if you get a chance to, the Las Vegas sign is a wonderful testament to how the city, how the world sort of discovered how the city is actually loved for itself. And I don't think that we can have any kind of peace happen, but that is an organic. And in learning from what I do say a digital mural lab, it's not about putting a piece of art somewhere and hoping people feel something with it. Sometimes it's organic. The memory comes from the land. And I think that we are witnessing that right now. And it's a roadside memorial. But let's get back into the car, because we end up at places where you can drive by pieces and see Bliss Dance, which is a migrant from up north, from Burning Man. City Center, this is a piece that actually looks best when you're in the car and you make a circle around it. And of course we have from the City of Las Vegas Mural Project, this beautiful piece that still, this is a sharp color, this is taken within the year. And this is actually the only time the sunlight's on it, because it's protected in the shade. But this becomes a special piece because it does sort of really kind of mark what the area was about. And going back, and here we go, those damn paintbrushes. And then we also have this in the Arts District roadside attraction, which was actually designed to be selfie-friendly. Was it furball? Snowball. Snowball. And it hasn't necessarily been messed around too much, but it is really an enduring piece. And this is right outside on the grounds, a monument to Summer Cup. And if you do get a chance to see it and experience it, this is another, I think, very important piece that helped define what public art could be in Las Vegas. This is our natural indigenous work. Tim Babington at the Smith Center, also a beautiful piece. And then with Life is Beautiful Festival, we'll be getting a lot more murals. As a muralist who comes from the community mural sector, I sometimes consider street art more plop art, that sort of sculpture art that came from the 80s, where it doesn't talk about neighborhood, but still at the same time, it's great to have people like Shepherd Ferry in town. This is a humongous piece. And of course, this is Clark County's Median project. All of this ties in that what really makes Las Vegas public art, the shared space is the medium, the highways, the roadside. And so I think the medium for me, if I went and got a PhD, that would be a metaphor for what public art is in the city of Las Vegas. I am not going to get a PhD. Lance Smith, talking about his piece of the background that was sort of sabotage, but the community came together to support an ethnic sensitive piece, but that really showed that people are protective of their pieces. Our masterpiece at UNLV, and Wayne Littlejohn's is also through Clark County, that I think is kind of going to take us to a new direction where public art can go, where it can be. But I think we also have to maybe start looking at our public artists in town and get them a little more trained in with infrastructure. Architects, I hope you have a seminar with public artists that are not familiar with infrastructure. I think that'll be a great workshop, a great collaboration, and you might find a couple people that you could use down the line. That's my advocacy for the artists. My phone number is 702. And of course, the piece that I really am really fond of, the Cato, because like I said, it really brought public art charging up over a hill into Las Vegas. And I think we have time for some questions. Thank you. Do we have any questions? In the back?
Municipality clients that would like to incorporate art in the project, but they dread going through the public art process. So instead, the one is to not call it art, create something with an art design and have it be handled through the contractor. So then the challenge is how do we handle it through the contractor? Keep the design intent and have quality to the work.
Oh, you're afraid of more
Is that perception correct from the municipality? What are the challenges?
Are we afraid of bureaucracy is what we're asking?
Yes.
You know, that's a good question, and sometimes I think that Clark County, for example, is committed to using local artists. I know that when you have a project funded by the state or the feds, you have to have an open call. But maybe that is a problem, and maybe that is a solution that can be done here next year, where you do have some sort of way to kind of find vendors or public artists or something. You have a different view on this because you do bring out other artists for a contract. How's that process work?
Well, I guess it's kind of varies. It really depends upon the project. And you're right, sometimes it does go through the contractor, not that it should be that way, but sometimes it happens that way to where it will end up being a subcontract through maybe an engineer or an architect, the actual artwork itself. Sometimes, with public art, there's other considerations that come into play. Like, for example, with hot dip and found font, the graffiti fill, the lighting, the question of arranging it so birds don't nest in the crevices, and make sure it doesn't become, a refuge for homeless people. Things like wind loading, even in terms of how it's anchored down. So there's a lot of different things. I guess the short answer is there's no one size fits all.
But there could be, I mean, there could be a template for a structure. Los Angeles Metro, they'll have their building set up and their panels ready, and they have the artist say, this is your space, build it. RFPs, as opposed to building the whole structure. Sometimes for the artists, it's a steep learning curve. We have muralists working through Clark County who later found out he was supposed to put up $500,000 bond for something when he was just making a painting and install it on the wall. So there's a steep learning curve for both, and I think there has to be a streamline so it can be easier and have the bureaucracy lessened, but become a more collaborative creative process, and that's when you come out with really great work. Do we have another question? Yes.
Having been familiar with Percent for Arts programs, and I think you're both on both city and county, I think the failure of our Percent for Arts program is that it doesn't attach to new development, and I think that that's been something that both the city and the county have been afraid of because they don't want to inhibit development. But I think that it's been so successful in other cities, like Seattle, San Francisco, for instance. How do we get, our local municipality to understand that this is something that's important, and also to help sort of fund, more for these public art programs?
Maybe that's a,
Yeah. Basically, Michelle was asking regarding the 1% for the arts, where it's more, the way our 1% for the arts is through the city is 1% of public buildings goes to public art, whereas in other cities there's a 1 or 2% of all buildings over a certain amount of money, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, that goes to or is required by the developer to actually put some public art on that building. The good news, Michelle, is that the city now has the 2030 plan, I think, which is the new plan beyond the Centennial Plan that came out 17 years ago that actually is going to require a certain investment at 1 or 2 or 3% for projects over 2 million, I think, 4 million? 2 million. So that's a major, when I heard that had been put in the plan, and I was part of some of that plan, but not that specific area, I was shocked because I had done some research in West Hollywood, and I would say that the city of West Hollywood, which is actually a municipality in the Los Angeles area, has a very progressive Percent for the Arts program that I thought would be a great model for us. And then when I saw that in the plan for the city of Las Vegas, I almost had a heart attack. I was like, wow, I didn't realize we progressed so quickly, So we have some good news on that front.
time for one more question?
Part of the long freeways, some of the sound walls and so on that have been done, they vary quite a lot. Some are more successful than others. And I'm just curious how you your process for deciding not only who might do that, but how long the stretch is. Because I find that some of the patterns, if you choose the wrong pattern and it's repeated for 5 miles, it's not nearly as interesting as having it for a mile or a half a mile.
I would almost say it almost risky putting you to sleep.
But no, I couldn't agree more. For whatever it's worth, Grandon is 3%. Okay, so, but for us, for the longest time, every available cent we had was plowed back into just simply building the infrastructure, trying to keep pace with the breakneck growth that we've all seen and experienced here for 2 decades. And really, it's just sort of recently that we are beginning to ramp up more attention to landscape and aesthetic treatments. And I actually think I know which stretch you're talking about, and I would agree with you. I'm not going to say which stretch, so you can quote me. But like any agency, you have different staff that come and go and retire and join. What I will say is I think The more recent treatments as of late have gotten better, have improved, and it is gaining momentum. And I'm excited with something like Neon Dunes that we're going to be able to create.
Okay, great. Any last thoughts?
Adopt an artist and make great pets.
Okay. Any last thought for you to tweet?
No. You know what? I guess I would just say that there's a long history of freeway and art, starting with graffiti as sort of the outlaw form of counterculture branding, and that this concept has now grown and evolved into some of the more formal programs we now see that are backed by municipalities, and that roadways are especially vital in southern Nevada, where we're dominated by sprawl and production home building, but also characterized by renewal, reinvention, and action.
And my last thought is, I think everybody here who has helped public art advance in Las Vegas, give yourself a round of applause, because you're beginning to get stuff on the map. There's a ways for it to grow, but if you helped out, let's just hear a round of applause for yourself, and thank you for coming.